Hello, everyone. Welcome to EMD Media's weekly show, The H Panel. The H Panel will be talking about Ethiopia and Eritrea's current state of affairs and the Red Sea, specifically Abiy Ahmed's take. This will be the subject for today's H Panel, and I'm joined by Taklai Gabra Mikhail, Faisal Roble, and Eskel Gabisa. Taklai, this is your second time for the H Panel. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And it's always a pleasure to have you, both Faisal and Eskel, as well. So, as usual, we'll start with the first segment. But to give a background of why we select this topic, exactly 11 days ago, the state media broadcasted something around 45 minutes of the Prime Minister's lecture, if you will, to the members of parliament. This is what he had to say, among many other things.
ለመሙላት እንስማማ ለዛኛውም እንስማማ ልክ ፍሬሽ ውሃ እናንተ እንደሚያስጨንቀው እኛ ያስጨንቀናል። አንደኛ ከተቆጣ ከመጣ ኢትዮጵያን ይሰነጥቃታል። ኢሚዲየት ትሬት ነው፣ አጠገባችን ነው ያለው። ይሄ ብቻ አይደለም፣ በኋላም በየቦታው አነሳዋለሁ። የዩኤን ጥናት እንደሚያሳየው የአንድ ሀገር ጂዲፒ ከ25 እስከ 30% የባህር በር ነው። ለምሳሌ ኢትዮጵያ 100 ቢሊዮን ከሆነ GDP.
So I think before and after this lecture, there were a lot of media coverage, both from the private and state media in the country on Red Sea, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and the region at large. So that would be the topic, and I would be seeking insights from the panelists as usual. But the first segment is what is the highlight of the week for each of the panelists. Taklai, let me start with you. What is the highlight? What stood out for you over the past week?
Well, I think that would have to be the highlight, the presentation, insofar as we could call it presentation by Abiy Ahmed of the need for harbor or for a port, and the subsequent rebuke that he received from Eritrea, from Djibouti, from Somalia, and also a sense of shock from the international community. It looks like to me. I think that would have to be the highlight for me.
Thank you for keeping it brief. Faisal?
Yes, I think my highlight is also related to Taklai's mention of Abiy's narrative, actually, and President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud's visit to Eritrea, which was, received by Eritrea with a huge fanfare and big hand. And in return, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, on his way out, he gave a very friendly interview by Tasfa News, where he mentions that Eritrea has helped train up to 10,000 Somali troops of all types from all faculties, and basically really went in depth the historical relationship between the two, and how Somalis and Somalia as a government is confident of their brothers and sisters in Eritrea. So it was really, in my opinion, not in the background, but in anticipation of what we'll be talking about today. That interview reflected me a strategic shift, or at least a strategic significance that it has. Thank you.
You guys are finishing quick before even I could manage to show on the screen. Okay, let me go to Eskel. What stood out for you?
There is a lot that is happening on the Horn of Africa scene, because this time it is the Horn of Africa. I think one needs to pay attention to what's going on in the war-torn areas of Ethiopia that are really being not anymore visible. The after effects of the war in the country, and the effects of the ongoing wars throughout the country. especially in the western part of Ethiopia, where we now see not only war, but also famine and disease. I would have thought these things were laid to rest, as Dr. Murugeta's book suggests, that we're past this interconnected issues of war, famine, and disease. But that's what we're seeing in Western Ethiopia. Only in two districts, woredas as they're called in Ethiopia, in two districts in Western Oromia, in the Walaga region, in Begi and Kondala, two districts. Now 123,000 people are in need of assistance. But there is no assistance that is being delivered there. The government is blaming the Oromo Liberation Army for causing the disease and not even allowing assistance to be delivered to the victims, to those in need. This has always been the story of Ethiopia, that it has always been known for famine and war. And I would have thought that we have really passed that time, that what happened like 40 years ago that preceded the fall of, 50 years ago that preceded the fall of Haile Selassie's government, and the drought that and famine that preceded the fall of the Derg government was not on the Ethiopian political and economic horizon, but it is happening. Now, there is also something related. There are other victims that are absolutely not visible, and this is the report from the Ministry of Education, that the Minister of Education of the Prosperity Party was defending the I think secondary school leaving examination, national exam. He defended that this week in Parliament. The report was issued about a week ago, maybe more than the window of the week that we have, that was issued at that time. But he was defending this record, abysmal record of about 900,000 students that sat for the national exam. Only 3.2%, or 27,000, I don't quite remember the exact number, but 27,267 students were able to have the passing mark of 50%. The average score of the students who took the exam was about 28.65%, and 840,000 students were declared a failure. Not that they just failed the exam, but they're a failure in Ethiopia, and their life prospect is also doomed to failure. And this was declared by the Minister of Education as if this is what they're supposed to do to correct the educational system that was in place by the previous administration. That they said one of the reasons that they are seeing that level of failure is that they stopped cheating. They stopped cheating is the vernacular that is used to justify that kind of disastrous outcome of the educational system in Ethiopia. What is missing there, and that the way I wanted to connect to the war, is that about 7.6 million students in Ethiopia are out of school. Some of the reasons that these 7.6, almost 6.8 million people are out of school is because 8,500 schools in the country have been damaged and or are unusable in the war-torn areas of Tigray, Amhara, and other places. In Tigray alone, 1 million students have not attended school. 1 million students have not attended school for 3 consecutive years. And when the war stopped and students were supposed to return to school, they were 3 years behind their age cohort. That is what happened in Tigray. It's not that they stopped cheating. It's because students were not going to school. Not at that level, but I'll come to that Even today, about 50% in the Amhara region, 50% of the expected 7 million enrollees, only 3.5 million have reported or enrolled this year. So that is 50% of the students in the Amhara region are not attending. And in general, about, they said about 6.8 million, or about 20% of the students that are expected to enroll and attend schools today in Ethiopia are not attending schools. And what is the report from the about the school leaving certificate from the Ministry of Education? That they stopped cheating. They blame this on the previous administration's school or educational policy. Keep in mind, this government came to power in 2018. That same year, they issued their new educational curriculum or policy. In the students that were reported failed the national exam, the 840 of them were in the 7th grade when this government came to power. So you can't blame it on the government that is preceding. It is because there is no budget for schools. The schools have been damaged. Schools have been not attending. So what we saw today, the 3.2% rate of passing the national exam is going to get worse. If this continues this way, it's really going to get worse. That really tells you about the abysmal condition, about the prospect, the life prospect of the students, not only from this year, but also from last year. About equal numbers were also reported failed. So a total of 1.7 million students leaving Ethiopian school national exam, who were supposed to go to higher education institutions, are not going to be able to go to higher education institutions. They're not going to support themselves. They're not going to support the country. They're going to be a burden on that country. This is the result of the war. And now we're preparing for another war with another country.
Thank you, Sgel, for that. I think the education sector needs its own panel. I think we might need to go back to that at some point. Let me go to the topic of the day, and I want to start with Faisal. I don't know the month or the day, but 30 years ago, you wrote this article, Ethiopia at Bay and the Afar Factor. And as you mentioned in the article, you are borrowing the title of the book by John Spencer, Ethiopia at Bay. Here you say, the loss of Massawa Asab and the possible gain of Deila and Berbera, both port cities are in Somaliland, you noted, are but a part of a larger puzzling picture of Ethiopia at Bay too. Central to today's Ethiopia, which was 30 years ago, is among many other factors, the issue of Asab and the role of Afars in Ethio-Eritrean relationship. You wrote this 30 years ago. So given that background, and hearing the Prime Minister lecturing the Parliament and all the media and all the discussions that are important to have following his lecture or presentation, as Taklai mentioned, what is your take? How are you following what is happening and what is being discussed?
Yeah. Thank you, Getachew. I think for Scale to go in depth to that statistics of education hit me very hard, because in the Somali region, 0.3% passed, 0.3. So you can tell that you don't have a generation in that region. And I agree with you, Getachew, we need a panel for that, and Scale did an excellent job. Yes. So I think when I was writing that article, to be precise, September 1993, the country was getting ready for the plebiscite for Eritrea, and everybody was sure at that time that Eritrea would go its way. And with John Spencer's background, it reminds you Ethiopia being a unique state. It's one of the few imperial countries in Africa, if not the only one. It's the only black imperial country. Some people call it colonial, like the Eritreans. Others call it feudal imperial country. So that was the undoing partly of that empire. And I think what was going on was, I knew that Eritrea was going on its own way. And there was an agreement between TPLF, EPRDF on the one hand, EPLF, and Sultan Ali Mirah. Thus, that tripartite group at least agreed for Eritrea to go its way for whatever reason. There were other powerful voices who opposed that but didn't get traction. At least they were in the opposition camp, and it was CODF, and now partly some of them is Zima. It was Goshu Walde's party, Medhin, and Professor Asrat Iyasuzi's party, Mullah Amara, or All Amara People's Party. Those were the groups that were, saying no. In the middle, you had the Afar people, Afar Liberation Front, Ardu, Afar Revolutionary Democratic Union, headed by Mahmoud Agas, and other groups who had their own issue. At that time, I said, I saw that the Asab chapter was incomplete. Even if Eritrea is let go, to me, from an analytical point of view, it was an unfinished business. Knowing Ethiopian history, knowing the national question, knowing that nobody consulted the Afar in a broader sense, knowing that Afar Liberation Front was still out there. Ardu at the time was a prima donna for the CODF Medhin Mullah Amara group, whereas Afar Liberation Front was with TPLF and all that in Eritrea. I knew the landscape was not finished. So basically, I was saying one of these days, the centrist. So I was looking from the center periphery point of view, and I was saying that the centrists did not buy this concept. The same group is that for a long time didn't buy the whole concept of Eritrea going, and that's why I was at a loss when I saw those groups, the CODF, the Medhins, the All Amara party, shaking with Asmara in the height of the Tigray war, just flipping the equation. So at the end of that, I came to a conclusion, or at least advanced some recommendations that I thought one of those could appear here. And one of them was the status quo with the tripartite, the Sultan, the TPLF, EPRDF, and the EPLF, which endorsed the Eritrea let go, which happened. Then the other one was the Afar Liberation Front, the Ardu with Muhammad Agaz, who was at the time with the centrist power, and their pressures. And I really anticipated that group sooner or later would be utilized for the proxy war if anybody comes to Eretz Kilo and questions the whole concept of Eritrean secession or Eritrean independence. And then the last one was, what about the scenario of asking the Afar people what they want, so that they can have either confederation, federation, or very extended autonomous situation where they can have their say. None of that happened, but my fear came to fruition that somebody like Abiy will come to Eretz Kilo and he will raise the ghost, and he will completely, come back to the politics of 1990. Actually, today, we are in a worse situation than what we were in 1990. At least in 1990, groups were talking, and it was more of a debate. Today, the Asab factor is taking Eritrea and Ethiopia into a major conflict. What I don't know, and maybe we can discuss that as part of our discussion, is A, would TPLF get burned in this new war, and what is their position? And B, would the Amara groups and the Fano this time stay strong with SIS and Eritrea and fight against Abiy, or vice versa? After sort of like giving them the cake, they will come back and side with Abiy and fight against Eritrea. We don't know. What we do know is that Ethiopian politics is based on vendetta, with the general concept of imperial state that has not sorted its issue. And I think we are back to where we were in 1990 or before that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Faisal, for getting us started with that. Tahlai, I just want to follow up on the last point Faisal mentioned, the issue of why now and why for. And the issue some people are talking is just Abiy is doing this to distract from what's happening in Amhara. And some are saying, no, this is a serious business and maybe he's going to war. Today, there was a report, I can't independently confirm, but a report of Ethiopian Air Force maybe doing some surveillance around the Tigray, Eritrea, or Ethiopia-Eritrea border, and so on. So what is your take? Reading what the reactions from Eritrean side, what's happening in the activities sphere, if you will, in Tigray and in Ethiopia. Taglai. You are muted. I can't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
So I think that the first thing to say, Getachew, is that this was always on the cards for Abiy. In 2020, I remember he told an American diplomat that the issue of Eritrea was going to be addressed after the Tigray war was over. So it was always going to happen as far as Abiy was concerned. It was always a matter of when for Abiy. Now, why now? I think part of the reason is because he is losing control in Ethiopia. I think, we all know that he has lost control in Tigray for a long time. He has lost control in Oromia for a long time. He has never had control in Somalia and in other parts of Ethiopia, really. And the control that he thought he had in Amhara is also ebbing away. And that really unsettles him because deep down, Abiy believes that that is his base. The Amhara political establishment is his base, but he's losing that as well. So I think he thought that one way of regaining the confidence of the Amhara base is by going into this very, very visceral issue, because the Amharas are viscerally attached to the issue of port and harbor and Asab and stuff like that. And I think one reason why he thought this is a good time is because he thought that would appease the Amharas who otherwise are going away from him. I think that is one reason. The second reason is, if we could for a moment, presume that Abiy was a normal person, it's very difficult assumption to make. It actually objectively makes sense to want to do that now, because Eritrea now is at its weakest point. It doesn't have any strong allies. It's really weak economically, politically, and in every other sense. And there are a lot of issues with Eritrea that he would otherwise have to address, not least the issue with Tigray and the issue of justice and accountability. There's a lot of pressure from the international community, and Abiy doesn't really have any leverage to do that. So by declaring war, he could sidestep that otherwise awkward issue. So it could also be because of that. And Abiy also, you get the impression that he believes harbor and port is a life or death situation, and he really believes the reason why Ethiopia is in the dire situation that it is now economically is because it doesn't have a harbor or a port, and he believed that if it was to get access to a port, its economical situation will all of a sudden change. So I think those are the reasons why he thought maybe it's a good time now. Now, I must say the way he did it, the presentation, I think about 30 minutes of it was a lecture on water, on the anatomy of water. He imbued water with a sense of life, with the sense of kind of, he anthropomorphized water, like the water speaks and has sense. And it was ridiculous, the presentation, the way he presented it. And the hawkish nature of the presentation was, of course, extraordinary. But then that is Abiy, so that shouldn't surprise us. But in terms of why, I think it's those three reasons, I believe.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tarlai. Uzgel, you have been on the H panel repeatedly over the past 2+ years. trying to give out a picture of the mindset and how the prime minister thinks and so on. So maybe building on that and what you are seeing here at the Red Sea agenda or topic, what are you reading in his mind? What are you hearing and reading?
I don't know how to read his mind, to be honest, and that was the point that I was trying to make. A sick mind you cannot really diagnose. But let me start with this. Posit this point that Ethiopia does not really need Assab as a port at this time. Ethiopia has been using other ports like Djibouti, Berbera, and to some extent since last year and potentially in the future, Lamu. Lamu is probably going to be more important for Ethiopia's economy. To be able to use Assab, they have to invest not less than $50 billion on upgrading the port that has not been used, and it's not up to standard of international shipment today, to upgrade the port itself, and then the infrastructure that would be needed to make Assab the port that Ethiopia uses and Eritrea uses as a gateway to the rest of Africa as well. So from that perspective, Assab requires an enormous amount of investment, but there has already been made investments in Djibouti, in the road to Berbera, in Berbera itself, and to the Lamu integrated the LAPSET. There's a lot that was already invested in there, so that is not going to come to waste if Ethiopia chooses chooses Assab as a port. What my point is that it doesn't make any sense for the prime minister to say Ethiopia needs its own port. Ethiopia has 3 ports that it could use right now, albeit paying fees, but there is no reason needs to go to war with Eritrea over the port of Assab. Now, the question that you asked me is, why does he need? Why now? The first thing is that we've also said this, and a lot of observers have also made the observation that the Ethiopian economy is in terrible shape, that it is really in the doldrums. Even the Ethiopian government economists do not know how to revive it. It needs an enormous amount of cash infusion now to run the government, to simply run the government. We know that from this year's budget that Ethiopia is now going to make investments, new capital projects investments this year. There is a hiring freeze on the Ethiopian government. Federal government is not going to hire any new hires this year. And 20% of the budget itself, they don't know where it's going to come for the $830 the budget for this year. Look, so Ethiopia really needs a cash infusion. They have gone to the creditors that they had to extend and renegotiate the terms of their debt. They have been rejected all around. No new loans are coming, even the one that the European Union promised was contingent upon improvement of the political condition. Only China was willing to extend the terms of payment for 1 year, but others are not forthcoming. Even China is not willing to extend new loans to Ethiopia. So there is really a drought of capital in Ethiopia. The only one country that promised Ethiopia to give the money that it needs, the capital that it needs, is the UAE. And the UAE has a new program, as you know, the new program or a strategy to become a dominant player in the Horn of Africa region. UAE has been at odds with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, and with Eritrea because of Eritrea's siding with these 2 countries. So the only country that UAE could count on buy off by in making investments is Ethiopia. Is Ethiopia. So this is as much the strategy of the UAE as it is Abiy's strategy to gain access to the sea. By the way, let me make this point since it came it came to my mind as I was speaking. That is, in the last 500 years, or more, Ethiopia had access to the sea, to a port, only for 40 years. Only for 40 years in the last 500 years. So the quest for access to the sea has always been a rallying cry for Ethiopia. Now that makes me transition to the second point, the political point. That is, Ethiopian rulers have always used, going to the time of the pharaohs, water of the Nile and the Red Sea as a rallying cry. What did the prime minister say, justifying that Ethiopia would use whatever means is necessary to get a job, because it's a matter of survival? If it is a matter of survival, you're not going to rest on the goodwill of your neighbors to give you pores. If this is really an existential issue for Ethiopia, Ethiopia is going to pull all its cards to gain access to the sea. But this has always been historically what Ethiopia's leaders have used. Johannes used it, Theodorus used it, Menelik used it. The quest for access to the sea has always been used as a political weapon to be used against external and internal enemies. Now, Ethiopia, in this issue, what the prime minister said is that he's going to rectify historic injustice and reclaim the rights that we have lost. What is he saying? What he's saying is that they lost access to the sea because of the TPLF. Therefore, blame it on the TPLF and correct what the wrong that TPLF had done. That way you can really mobilize any anti-EPRDF forces in Ethiopia, especially those in the Amhara region. So this is a political calculation that he made by making access to the sea an existential issue and an issue that you can blame on the previous administration. And thirdly, it's a security issue. That is, look, Eritrea has now become the hub. As much as Eritrea's president is a pariah, has been a pariah, right now in the Horn of Africa, he has become the go-to guy. Russia is going to him, China is going to him, even in the region. Djibouti is trying to normalize relations with Eritrea. Somalia is, as mentioned earlier, Somalia is also trying to normalize relations with Eritrea. The Sudan guy who has his own trouble was in Eritrea. So he is now looming the larger figure in the Horn of Africa, and Abiy could feel that weight. What he could do security-wise to Ethiopia, but also by assisting Abiy's opponents. Those are the three factors that converged to make Abiy make those remarks for 45 minutes. By the way, let me say then also, by the way, from what I have heard, the speech that he gave to Parliament was actually given in June. He pulled it simply out of the archives to display it on TVs, the government-controlled TV, only this week. Why did he do it now? Because he is in trouble for the three reasons that I mentioned: economic, political, and security.
Interesting. He's orchestrating, he's the director, the producer of every movie in that country, including Peace and War. Let me come back. Thank you, Skel, for that insight. Faisal, one of the things I think Tahlai mentioned that everyone is reacting to this in different ways. But what we see here is Djibouti, Somalia, of course, Eritrea rejecting this. And combined with domestic actors in different regions and political parties, media, what's your reading in terms of the feedback, the reaction, both domestically and internationally? What is your assessment of that, Faisal?
Yeah, thank you. So before I come to that, I'd like to just touch quickly my understanding of several factors that are also bothering Abiy in addition to what has been said already. I think the fact that he was not included in the Red Sea group in terms of security, him and United Arab Emirates bothered him a lot. Everybody else who is in that area is included. And in the last 10 years, UCLA has been focused, literally moved its African studies research resources from any other subject to the study of the Red Sea. So anybody who used to study anything in African studies area has been doing the Red Sea for the last 10 years. We just didn't know. I met some of them at the African studies several times. So what happened is, I think my colleague touched a little bit, and I did several lectures on how I see in terms of our region. See, in the past, we used to have the big powers on one camp and the rest. Russia and America were the superpowers, and everybody used to run to them. I think in the last 30 years, what had emerged is an intermediary power in the middle. That is United Arab Emirates, the Saudi, the Qatari, the Turkish, the Iran, who are very close to us, who have historical, cultural, and political relationship with the Horn of Africa. And today, our interaction with the West, or for that matter, Russia, is only secondary to what the United Arab Emirates can do, or the others. A good example is what they have done in the war of Tigray and or TDF, TPLF versus the Ethiopia. Without this intermediary power, the political landscape of the region would have been totally different. So we need to keep that in mind. I think the rejection is came from the three groups that we mentioned. Somalia in particular have known about Abiy's intentions, as Scale said, since June. I tweeted about this subject probably as far back as June. I had direct information from some parliamentarians and some people who work in Addis Ababa, telling me as far back as June, this is what Abiy is saying. I put in the Facebook, I put on my Twitters. So we have known, and Somalia has been getting some information. I'm preview of a little information where about 2 months ago, Prime Minister Abiy asked the president of Somalia about the port issue, and they thought he was really joking. They thought he was just casually, you know how Prime Minister Abiy sometimes likes to be friendly, so they didn't take it seriously. But when this thing came up, everything that they have been hearing or getting through intelligence became a real thing. That's why it was not really so difficult for the Somali and the Djibouti group to really react to it quickly. They understood, and there have been some interchange in between in terms of information. They completely understood that this was not an issue of port. I think as international regulation is work, Djibouti is a pre-example of the law of sea and how a landlocked versus a coastal sea country work in a very productive way. And I think the African long-term strategic way to manage what they call the waterways and the environment cites the Ethiopia-Djibouti relationship as the perfect example of how you utilize both land transportation and a cost for a landlock. So per international law, there is no problem for Ethiopia at this point in time to have access, transit, and use its own ships with an internationally sanctioned flag and move around the region as well as internationally, all the way from Lamu to Assab. That's not an issue. And Ethiopia can always win if on the international court if that was the case. However, the problem with Abiy's narrative is for him to say Ethiopia wants to own a port. Not only did that anger Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Eritrea, but from what I'm hearing, Uhuru did not welcome that. And even Southern Sudan leaders are very much worried about this. not to mention the fact that Sudan is now in the same league with Eritrea. So the old cliche that Ethiopia is a Christian island is really now turned into Ethiopia a diplomatic disaster country. From Egypt to Sudan, to potentially Southern Sudan, to Kenya, to Somalia, Djibouti, and Eritrea, all have discomfort. What could possibly happen is any one of this country or any joint of this country could lobby for moving the AU seat from Addis Ababa, because it has not been the host that you would expect Ethiopia to be for all this. If it cannot guarantee peace, safety, and security at two levels. One, internally, given what had happened in Tigray and now happening in Oromia and in the Amara region. And two, now doubling down on that and creating instability in the greater Horn of Africa region. I think there could be a case where some people can bring. Last time we know people like Malas shut down that proposal when it came from Senegal and others, because they could show how Ethiopia was showing level of economic growth, safety, and comfort. You cannot argue that now. You have lost that. So I think Abiy has created an island that is suffering from diplomatic disaster. And with that, I would not be surprised if Djibouti does not come to the next events that the AU may have in Addis Ababa. So we are in a bad shape. Just one last final thing. I think this whole concept of Abiy wanting a port is unsettling to everyone. I don't think he's doing only for internal consumption. I think dogmatically he believes he can get it. He can get it because he has seen defeating, quote unquote, Tigray. He sees, holding Ola for the last 5 years in where they are. He sees silencing the Ogaden National Liberation Front, which was the most ferocious liberation front. So this guy has a mentality to say that if I can do with TDF and TPLF, I can do with Eritrea. And God help us, I think he's ready for a war.
Amen to that. Taklai, just on the same question of how you are looking at the reactions from different sectors, let's focus on Tigray, maybe Eritrea as well. What is your reading of how people are responding to this? There has been a repeated call from Abiy for Tigrayan generals to join him in the war in Amhara, and they have resisted successfully, I must say, over the past weeks and months. And there are people who say if Abiy is going to go to war, by the way, we cannot maybe question that, because he used to say the same thing, no war, just while he was getting ready for war on Tigray. So his mention of no war, this would be maybe happening in his children's or grandchildren's time. I think we shouldn't take that seriously. So what's your reading of how Tigray and Eritrean different sectors, opposition or otherwise, are reacting to this, Taklai?
If I could preface my answer to that by adding 3 observations from Abiy's presentation, Getachew, because I think they are important. I think the first one, we're talking about port and harbor and stuff like that, but from the way Abiy spoke, it was clear that his desire was more than that. It was for a coastline, for a shoreline. It wasn't just port or harbor that he was speaking about, because he was at times he spoke about irrigation, he spoke about fishing, he spoke about how those things would change the economic shape of Ethiopia. So clearly he wants something more than a port or more than harbor. And although he spoke about Somalia and about Djibouti and about other possibilities, clearly he was speaking about the port of Asab. There is no doubt that the port that he had in mind was Asab. I think the reason he didn't want to speak directly was he wanted to add some element of plausible deniability, just in case things go south. And I think the other point, I think it's important to take note of the reaction in Ethiopia. Now, if you randomly tune into any TV or radio based in Addis Ababa, all the time you would hear people talking about the port and the same issue. So it's kind of approaching hysteria now. Ethiopia is the one single most important issue. So it wasn't a case of Abiy making some sort of misadventure or miscalculation or a mistake. It was something that has been thought through properly, that has been given as an agenda for the nation, that is being pushed through now with all the might and with all the resource of the nation. So as far as Abiy is concerned, this is a very, very serious project that he has undertaken. In terms of the reaction in Tigray, Getachew, I think generally there is an awareness among the Tigrayan political elites that Tigray now is very, very limited in terms of what it could do. I think there is also a war fatigue, that there is a desire to avoid war at any cost. So people, you hear a lot of people say that this is something that Tigray should just sit out. This is none of our. No, I'm not saying that I agree with that view, but that is the mainstream view that you hear in Tigray. This is something that we should get out of. It's none of our business. But also, interestingly, there is a realization in Tigray that actually in 1991 the TPLF had made a mistake in totally sort of jettisoning the issue of port. And if Abiy was to sort of make amends for that, there seems to be some sort of at least moral support for that, for the Abiy position now in Tigray, which I think is a little bit surprising, because I wouldn't have thought that would be a mainstream view in Tigray. But the overwhelming view in Tigray is just one of wanting to be left alone from all this. And in Eritrea, I think it's unanimous, and they are offended. They are shocked, and they feel a sense of betrayal as well, because part of the deal between Isaias and Abiy was that they would finish off the TPLF, and then a lot of things were supposed to happen between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and none of them seems to happen. On the contrary, things have gone south in terms of the partnership between Isaias and Abiy, and I think there is an element of shock about that.
Thank you, Taglai. This is the Eritrean Afar National Congress that issued a press release on October 20th. They talk about, of course, like you mentioned, they are the opposition group. To put it in a perspective, but they are saying Eritrea's current regime and Isaias Afwerki are responsible for much of regional instability, human rights abuses, and obstacles to people-to-people relations and socio-economic development. While saying that, they say the territorial integrity of the Eritrean Afar should be respected by is transpiring in Ethiopia. As well, maybe on the issue of, again, how this might play out. If it's a temporary PR, given the timing of recording versus releasing, maybe, who knows, before our next episode of the H panel, we might have another agenda. Or do you see this really going seriously and maybe going to the next level, whatever that next level is? Pascal.
Yeah, you can make some endless speculations about what prompted him to release it right now. I wouldn't always underestimate Abiy Ahmed's inexplicable predisposition to undo whatever the EPRDF had done over the last 30 years. He thinks, for whatever reason, to me, it's really inexplicable that anyone with the same mind, that there were some excesses during the EPRDF, but not everything that the EPRDF had done was bad for Ethiopia. But he has that disposition. He wants to undo everything. He feels that the Ethiopian people support him in any political project that he has to dismantle the constitution, dismantle the multinational federation, dismantle the educational system that I talked about earlier. He has this inherent or unexplained disposition to simply go against anything that the TPLF had done. There is really something negative energy in him that moves him in that direction. Secondly, I wouldn't underestimate that he has this urge, this narcissistic urge to feel like he has accomplished something every day. Now, completing GERD, which he did not, somebody else was really working on it, but he took credit for it because this happened on his watch. He has, again, this grand feeling of grandiosity, a feeling of accomplishment, that something great happened on his watch while he was Prime Minister of Ethiopia. And this quest for the sea, perhaps a realization of access. It's not that Ethiopia really needs asset. I don't really think so. Ethiopia has spent a lot of money on upgrading the transit from the center of the country to Djibouti and to Berbera, and also the plan to invest a whole lot more on expanding the highway that goes from Addis Ababa, the Pan African Highway, to make it 6-lane. I don't think Ethiopia really realistically is trying to simply subvert all of those investments and start from scratch by obtaining asset. But if he gets asset, that he would probably be remembered, immortalized in history for the man that brought back asset to Ethiopia. He would be tempted by that. It's not a realistic goal, but I wouldn't underestimate his lure. Thirdly, he is really mad at Kenya. He's absolutely mad at Kenya right now. You can see it through some of his speeches because William Ruto was able to host the climate change summit in Kenya. He was despising it for that happening. He thinks that should have been done in Ethiopia because of the green legacy, the 32 billion seedlings that he had planted. He thinks that Ruto had stole his thunder on that respect. He is ignored by the United States. Ethiopia was known for the anti-terrorism activities that the United States was conducting in the region. Ethiopia was the anchor state in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia is no longer the collaborator with the United States on anti-terrorism activities. Kenya is right now. The Defense Secretary William Lloyd Austin made a point of simply ignoring Ethiopia after traveling to the Horn of Africa. He was in Djibouti, where he met with the Djibouti president. The president of Somalia was also in Djibouti to meet him, and then he flew to Nairobi, signed some military agreements, and flew out of the Horn of Africa without saying a thing about Ethiopia. That hurts for Abiy. That really hurts for Abiy. So he is trying to do something dramatic to break out of that neglect, that diplomatic neglect, by doing something aggressive. These are my psychological urge that is in Abiy that is driving to do the unthinkable. But his speech invited that kind of reaction from the neighboring countries. Even though he said, "Oh, let's discuss this," he didn't make any declaration. He simply said, "Let's discuss it. Let's discuss it in Parliament." But the speech that he gave was really excessive on many fronts, explaining about the importance of water, the functions of water, for 15 minutes. Quite excessive in terms of making a case for Ethiopia's access to the sea. It was quite aggressive also when he said that we should even disregard. Look, this is not about Barbara. This is not about Zayla. This is not about Djibouti. It's not about any port in that neighborhood. It's about Assad. Because towards the end of his speech, he made a point of putting some graphics on his presentation, saying that the Afar are on Ethiopia and Eritrean side. And to think about only the colonial boundaries, respect for the colonial boundaries, is not right. That's a sign of aggression. He is trying to conduct an aggression. So his presentation actually telegraphs a message that he really means it. His presentation, his claim about historical ties that Ethiopia had with the Red Sea littoral is not true. Look, he mentioned 3 points: Aksum, 19th century Alula Banaga, and then Haile Selassie. There is no historical claim that you make that Ethiopia had access to the sea for a long time by taking an example from the 1st century CE and then jumping over 19 centuries to the 19th century and referring to a speech that Alula Banaga made in a historical context. He was not even referring to Ethiopia's natural coastline. That's not what Alula was saying. But he was really making a case to pick a fight in that area simply for the reasons that I outlined, the psychological reasons. Because Ethiopia is the one, by the way, it's not like TPLF jettisoned the post of Assad. The agreement in 1991 was Ethiopia will be able to use Assad, and Ethiopia used Assad as a free port, Massawa as a free port for almost three years. But then 3 or 4 years. Then the Meles government made a decision to come up with a diversification strategy of not limiting Ethiopia's options to only one port, because if that one port failed, that would be disastrous for the economic strategy that he had in place. So Ethiopia left Assad to disuse, not because he just wanted to jettison it. It's the diversification strategy. Assad could have been used, but Assad fell into disuse because of Eritrea's war. I do not underestimate that he would just go to war, and he's trying to pick a fight with Eritrea because Eritrea now threatens him by helping his opponents within the country.
Thank you, Skel, for that. We are very close to the hour, but I will give you each a short moment to share with us your final thoughts. One of the things that some people are discomforted with is the fact that the war on Tigray and now in Amhara is not getting the kind of reaction you would expect from international community in terms of accountability and pressuring Abiy and so on. So maybe that would give him, okay, I can do it again, and this time for the sea. So maybe, Faisal, do you see this going beyond the speech, the media campaign, all that? The reason I'm saying is you mentioned about maybe other countries like Djibouti might go even further in taking this the African Union issue. So I mean the seat of the African Union. Let me play this short clip that you were referring to, I guess, from Meles Zenawi years back.
If we are considering a union as a panacea, as a magic wand which removes all our economic problems, clearly we will be. Irrespective of what government rules Ethiopia, Ethiopia has always been committed to African independence and liberation. Who trained Mandela? Emperor Haile Selassie, the reactionary, trained Mandela, the revolutionary. Mandela was trained in Ethiopia. Who supported Mugabe in his fight against Rhodesia? Mengistu. Internally, Mengistu was a butcher. But on the issue of Africa, Mengistu was as solid as Haile Selassie was. Ethiopia's commitment to Africa has not varied with governments. You could have Emperor Haile Selassie, and you could have Mengistu, and you could have a different government. Didn't matter. Every African knows how it feels, every Ethiopian knows how it feels to be alone. We were alone on the table of the Europeans during the League of Nations, and we know what happened to us then.
So the question to you, Faisal, is, does it matter now Ethiopia is under Abiy?
Yeah, it matters. I mean, as you can see from this video, Mallas is selling historical polemic that many people may not be able to sell. He's selling an imperial history. He's selling an oppressive history. He's selling a quasi-unpopular history, even to Ethiopians, to the rest of the world, to convince them that the Ethiopia that they like to criticize is not what they see. So I think it was to me more of a personal ability of the deliverer of the message than the message itself. Because at the League of the Nation, Ethiopia was acting, yes, alone, but for what? It was getting a slice of the Somaliland. It was getting a slice of the Eritrea. So that part is, controversial. But the man who is delivering is so skilled, so powerful, that he literally disarmed his critique. Does Ethiopia have somebody like that now? That is really the challenge. Sometimes the weapon that you have could be small or big. What makes the difference is who is fighting with that weapon. And Mallas Zenawi in that episode proved to us that he was a great political statesman and can really get out of the confines of Ethiopia's quagmire and show a great vision to the rest of Africa, where everybody put their hands on their cheek and listened, and that thing was killed. Today, can Abiy come up and say, we are destabilizing the Horn of Africa because we want to make that Ethiopia that you all love survive? Can he sell that? Can he sell that to Egypt, to Somalia? So he has a big challenge. Having said that, I'll just conclude by really coming back to this nagging issue of access to the sea and the port, which was our discussion today. In June 2018, Abiy visited Mogadishu. At the door of Villa Mogadishu, Villa Somalia, standing next to Farmacho. He read a communique that the two signed, which I read, June 2018. 10 items, and item 4 calls for the two countries to invest and develop 4 ports which Ethiopia can use. And Zeila is included in that, although it's not mentioned, but Zeila is included, Berbera is included, Kismayo and Marka particularly for, military purposes. So as we have discussed it today, Ethiopia's challenge under Prime Minister Abiy is not an issue of access to the sea or even utilize ports. It is not. We have proven that today. His concept of economics has been debunked today, in the sense that Ethiopia was growing sometimes by 10% annually in many, many years. And actually, I agree, given all the shortcomings that EPRDF regime had, it has proven to the African countries that if you stick with a strategy that you care about, you can develop your economy within a short period of time. Between the time I left Ethiopia and when I came back, the change that you see in Addis Ababa, in Jijiga, in Harar, in everywhere, in the Amara, where they were saying thousands of students graduate with engineering degree annually. This was just impressive. Today, to exchange that with a 3% graduation of high school, literally a piece of onion costing 300 birr inside Addis Ababa, factories to the tune of 1,000 factories being closed. This is more than really the issue that we are talking. This is a country that is falling apart, and the issue of port is just a political tool that Abiy is trying to use to really take the pressure off of his back. But I think usually leaders use this tool is to just buy time. Given Abiy, Prime Minister Abiy, given what we have seen with Tigray and Amara region now and in Oromia, I think we are slated for a very dangerous few days ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal, for that. Scale, final thoughts?
I don't know if there is any country in Africa, in the African Union today, that is prepared to propose a resolution to relocate the seat of the AU to any other place at this moment in time. I think many, Musa Faki is in his pocket, Abiy's pocket, is personal friends with him. Addis Ababa is a playground for many African countries. Some of them have actually received land grants in the country. So I don't think that anybody would go against him. But there may be some, like the president of Senegal, who admonished Eritrea for being the spoiler in the AU. They might invoke that thing. I think Senegal was the country that even in 1993 that Meles was defending Ethiopia's commitment. So that kind of thing might come from places like Senegal, but not from the countries that are surrounding Ethiopia. I don't think they have the courage of their convictions to do so. Given that the fact that he has now flaunted the OAU, the Cairo OAU declaration that is calling upon independent African countries to respect the colonial boundaries, that he'd said that Ethiopia should not be governed by that. I think if they have the courage of their conviction, they should. Because if a country that is hosting the headquarters or the secretariat of an organization does not abide by the charter and the rules and the declarations of that country, it doesn't have the moral right that Meles presented, the right that we were always committed. We're committed to the AU and its principles. Then there is a sufficient ground. This is the problem with Abiy. He doesn't think about his case. He only thinks in tactical terms, not in strategic terms. He only delivers speeches that could arouse the people in front of him or for short-term gains. But if you really carefully look at the presentation that he made for Ethiopia, albeit saying that this is only a matter of discussion, as I said earlier, it's excessive, it's a declaration of war. When one says that we cannot survive without a port because we had 120 million people today, we're going to be 150 million people today. If I don't do it, my children will do it. That's a force for destabilization. Ethiopia has really transformed itself from being an anchor state in the Horn of Africa and a significant player in Africa in general to a spoiler in the Horn of Africa, to destabilizing force in the Horn of Africa. Nobody is going to Addis Ababa to consult with him. I think most people have now come to say that either he doesn't have what it takes, the competence to run a state, or he is really a madman with whom you have to sever all your ties. So he is a spent case, and if anybody in Africa has the courage of their convictions, they will do something about it.
Thank you, Scale, for that. Taglai, today's last word is yours.
Oh, thank you. That's a pleasure. I think it was Eskel or Faisal who said that the reason Abiy made that very incendiary and provocative speech might be to divert our attention away from the actual problem that he hasn't been able to solve. And insofar as that was the intention, he has succeeded. There is suffering in Oromia, war in Oromia. Nobody is talking about that. Western Tigray continues to be occupied by Eritrean and Amhara forces, and the people of Tigray continue to suffer. But nobody is talking about that. There is war raging in Amhara. Actually, I was just reading that there was drone strikes the last couple of days in various cities in Amhara, but nobody is talking about that. Everybody has been occupied by this single issue. So Abiy has succeeded, if that was the intention. And in Ethiopia, again, as I said earlier, there is a feverish enthusiasm for discussion and talk about port and harbor and war and the need to acquire a port by any means necessary. So, like Ezekiel said, of course, it was a declaration for war. It can't be anything as there's a single issue that everybody in Ethiopia is talking about, and you could see that they are preparing for war. And my message, if I believed in the existence of the international community, which I, thanks to the Tigray war, which I don't believe there is such a thing as international community. But my message to them would be that they should try their best to restrain Abiy. He's a very dangerous man. I don't think there are serious people around him who are trying to give him counsel, sound advice to restrain him. I think he's very, very unhinged. I think he could cause enormous damage, more than the damage that he has caused, and he has caused extraordinary, ordinary amount of damage, especially in Tigray. But he is still capable of unleashing horror in the Horn of Africa. So I worry. I think enough number of people have died in Ethiopia, and I think it's about time that we stopped war. But I worry that there will be another round of war very soon. And I every day I go to bed with horror and trepidation. And that's it. And thank you for the opportunity to have the last word. Getachew, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Taklai, Scale, Faisal, for joining us, and as usual for your insightful contribution. And this may be an agenda that we have to come back again to at some point. So we'll follow that closely. And good night from here. Thank you, Taklai, by the way, because at your time it's past midnight. I have to say that. And good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you have been following us live, the weekly H panel, UMD Media's panel every week, Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We are live online. We are also broadcasted to the Horn of Africa on HBS, Horn Broadcasting Services. If you like, share, and subscribe to our channel, there is an algorithm behind YouTube channels that will enable distribute, to share it with more people and show it to more audiences. So kindly do that. And I will see you with yet another episode of the H panel next week. Good night.